Hey guys, this is Steve from Cookout Coach over at the Adrenaline Barbecue Company's FAQ live stream tonight. I'm joined tonight by the Slow and Sear inventor and owner of Adrenaline Barbecue Company, Mr. Dave Parrish. How you doing tonight, Dave?
I'm doing great, Steve. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. Made it through the first day of the work week and get to talk barbecue tonight, so life's good.
I always love talking barbecue, especially on a Monday when we ship so much product.
There we go. And also, yeah, also as normal, Christy is going to be in the comments tonight helping y'all out. And you might see an appearance from the Baby Back Maniac, Justin, as well later. But that being said, half an hour seems to go fast for us, Dave. So what do you say we jump on into these questions we got?
Let's do it.
There we go. All right. So,
like you said earlier,
it just gets me pumped when I hear that. I can't help it.
Let's do it.
All right. So, so the first question we have is it's a pair of questions, but to start with, this commenter asks, for prime rib, how much external fat should we trim off of the roast?
That's personal preference. I like to trim off most of it because I want the seasoning on the meat, not on the fat. And a lot of people cut the fat off. But if you're a family that loves to eat the fat, leave it on there. If you're not, take it off. Either way, you can't go wrong. It's a great hunk of meat.
Absolutely. Yeah, I same way. If I have a seasoning that I really want to stick to that meat, I'll try to take as much fat off as possible. But when you're talking about something like prime rib, you know, just a roast full of ribeyes, when that ribeye fat crisps up for me, it just takes on a flavor of its own if it comes from a good cut of beef.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I will say is that it takes the salt longer to get through the fat than it does the meat. So if you're dry brining, that is something that you should think about. You know, if you have over a couple of days to let the salt soak in, it doesn't really matter as long as you've got meat on one side. The side facing the bone is fine to have it mostly on there, and it will go through the fat, especially if you wet it. But the shorter amount of time the salt has to penetrate if all things being equal, you might want to get rid of the fat.
Sure. Sure. So following that up, this comment apparently is getting ready for a cook for a lot of people. And they say whenever they use the slow and sear, they get about a quarter cup of ashy water in his ash pan below the one-touch vent. Is this boil over, or should they be looking for a leak in the water trough?
I can only remember 2 instances where we had a leak, and I can remember several hundred instances where people have called and asked about that question. So it's probably not a leak. The best thing to do is when it's cold, pour water in it and see if the water leaks out. If it does, you got a leak and we'll replace it.
There you go.
Like I said, though, we've only had to do that a couple of times. So you're probably dealing with one of the 3 other things. And here I am. I got to remember what the 3 things were. One is you moved your kettle after you put the water in it. And it is really easy to slosh the water out, surprisingly easy, even if you have a deck that is shaky. And if you have a shaky deck, you shouldn't be cooking on it anyway. But it can be kind of easy to slosh the water out. And okay, I'm not going to call anybody out here, but just consider, is it possible you may have missed the reservoir when you poured the water in? Yes, even you, it could have happened. I've done it too. And if you miss the reservoir, the water is probably going to end up in the ash pan. Another thing is if you fill it really high and the water could boil over the edge, and then there's a 4th option. So number 4. So we got a bonus option here. Sometimes, depending on the weather, it's so humid that condensation collects inside the cooker and then just drips down at the bottom. So could be any of those things. See, I mentioned 3, I came up with 4. And now you guys are going to have to wonder, did I have 4 the whole time? And I was just afraid I wasn't going to be able to remember them all. So something to do on.
They're all more concerned with the fact that now they have a to-do list to go check.
Yep. And we have an email that has all that. So if anybody has a question, we'll fire the email out to you so you can consider those things as well. But that's all of them.
Great. The next one, keeping in that prime rib spirit, this commenter mentioned they found the video where you and Justin did a prime rib about a year ago. They want to know, why do you wait till the prime rib reaches an internal temperature of 130 to pull the roast. They say it seems like that's more possibly going to yield a medium result after the sear.
So medium rare goes up to 135 or 140 off the top of my head. I forget which. I think it's 140. So you can go a few degrees higher than the 130. And it also depends on how thick the roast is. If it's just the eye of the ribeye, or if you got the ribeye and the cap, if you have the ribeye, the cap, and the bone, you know, the bigger it is, the higher overall internal temp you want to get it to before you start searing. It will rest up a little bit. I honestly don't remember if we said 130 in that video or not. I may have said that to just to err on the side of caution. Personally, I usually pull a roast at 127 or 128 because it is going to rest up a little bit. And I also consider how quickly am I going to cut it after I get through cooking. If I'm going to cut it fairly quickly, then, you know, 130 is great because it's not going to rest up because you're not going to let it rest up. If it's going to sit there 10 or 15 minutes, then maybe it'll rest up a few degrees and you're going to do the 127, 128. For me, it's usually going to rest there 10 or 15 minutes. So I do the 127 or 120. But it's the size of the roast and how long you're going to let it rest up. And remember that medium rare goes up, I think, all the way to 140. So you can you still got a few degrees to go after 130.
Excellent. Yeah, some channel recently, I can't remember who it is, did a comparison to see how long things rest up, and one of the interesting things to note from that video was a thinner cut like a ribeye rested up 5 to 10, where I think they used a pork butt as the other cut, and the larger cut, because they brought it up slow, it only went up like 3 or 4 degrees total.
So that's a good point. And the thing to think about is when the meat is resting up, what's actually happening is the temperature of the surface meat is equalizing with the temperature of the interior meat. The more interior meat you have, the farther down that final rest temperature is going to be brought to. So that's why I said thickness matters. The thicker the roast is, the less rest up you're going to have. And because we teach people to sear using the cold grate technique, when you sear, you're searing the entire surface of the steak and you're bringing it up above 300 degrees where the Maillard reaction occurs and you get that browning. Since you're searing the entire surface, you're actually, when you use the cold grate technique, you're hitting the surface of that steak with more heat than you would be hitting it with using other methods. So rest up temp can be even more when you're using the cold grate technique.
Great. It's a fantastic answer. Yeah, I guess that's that. So moving on. Someone wanted to ask, how do you like to cover your grill if it's raining? And I think they're talking about actively trying to cook and smoke during the rain. Do you have a method, or do you just try to cook around that and not cook when it's supposed to rain?
I definitely prefer cooking when it's not raining. I don't have a specific method I use because our back deck is covered. Usually when I'm cooking in the rain, it's somebody else's place. And so it's always an improv. I'm improving. Hard words. Words are hard. Anyway, so I'm improvising. Yes, that's what I meant. So improvising, and I just do whatever I can. I've seen people, you know, in our Facebook group have umbrellas above the kettle, come up with some kind of little damper that goes over the top vent that lets the water fall off. I don't have a better answer for that one. If people post to the Facebook group, we can revisit that one with some cool techniques. But off the top of my head, I don't really have any go-to technique that I use. It's always at somebody else's place. So,
I actually have a funny story involving this, but just so people know, that Facebook group that David just mentioned, I just went ahead and posted that in the live chat here. But actually, so I was doing some cooking around the house yesterday, and it was a little drizzle, but it was calling for some more, and I was just trying to get this dish knocked out I've been working on. Well, I was using a pop-up canopy like I use at a competition. It's just a little 10 by 10
Yep.
pop-up. And I knew it was supposed to be sunny here today, so I didn't want to put it away wet because maybe some other people have this problem, but occasionally I get forgetful and I forget to pull it back out and let it dry so it doesn't get moldy. So I decided to leave it out on the back deck over top of the grill. And my wife sent me a picture this morning of my canopy laying in the yard, legs busted up. So, while it worked great to keep the water off the grill, I'm going to say maintenance, but the care involved with it got overlooked slightly, and I paid for that one. So
I didn't mention canopy because that's not a very it's not, so you might spend as much as the canopy as you do on the slow and sear or more. So that's not a cheap solution, but good. Luckily for you, now's a really good time of year to grab a canopy, because if they're still at Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever, they're probably discounted. I have I don't remember if it's a 10 by 10 or a 12 by 12, but I got it for, I think, $67 at for when we have to go somewhere and there's rain involved. So if you want a good deal on a canopy, now's a good time to check that out.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm definitely in the market at the moment. Yeah. So moving on, I guess. This commenter wanted to know, what are the advantage of the new temperature probes with 2 meat probes versus 1? I'm assuming they're asking about how sometimes with the new thermometers you get 2 pointy probes instead of 1 shorter one for your grate temperature.
Yeah.
They said they went ahead, they got the Maverick with 1 grill probe and 1 meat probe.
So the advantage of having the dual purpose probe is kind of obvious. I mean, it's got a pointy tip, so you can use it to measure meat or pit temperatures. What the disadvantage is, that may not be as obvious, is these thermometers are usually thermistor technology, which is basically a small ball of metal in the tip. And then there's 2 wires running into that ball of metal. And then depending on the heat of the metal, the resistance varies across those wires, and they tell temperature. These thin meat probes are a little, and the reason I mentioned the little ball of metal is if it gets too hot, it melts, and then that probe won't work anymore. That's why probes break, is they get overheated. With a thick, fat, non-tip pit probe, it's harder to spike, to get a transient spike due to radiant heat or just being close to a heat source that burns out the probe. So, and then with the pointy meat probes, they're a little bit more delicate when used as a pit probe, because if you get them really close to the fire or something, that little thermistor ball inside them will more quickly melt. So.
It's a great answer. I actually had wondered that myself. Seems like there are a lot of companies that are trying to go to the 1 probe to rule them all, sort of.
Yeah, and we do that with the XR50 as well. Personally, I don't, especially with the slow and sear, the radiant heat's not on the indirect side, so there's not much of a threat of overheating it using or a transient overheat using radiant heat. And then with convective and conduction, it's really hard to get over 572, which is the limit of our hybrid probes. So it's a good way to go in that situation. If you have a grill where you are concerned about a brief spike in radiant heat, where the probe is getting near a radiant heat source, then yeah, you might want to go with the Old Faithful style pit probe.
Great, gotcha. Sorry about that. So this next question is great, because with you being the advocate of the cold grate and the reverse sear, this commenter wanted to know, how do you do a proper front sear, and when is the right time to do that?
So a proper front sear is identical to the reverse sear. It's just that you're searing in the beginning instead of the end. I did a demonstration video last year where I did a live sear of a steak, and I think I got the steak done in 5 or 6 minutes from fridge temp or sitting on a plate. I think it'd been sitting out of the fridge for a little bit, maybe half hour tops. We we've done countless reverse sear videos, a lot of them, not countless, but a lot. So I would do front sear with a thin steak where it's really hard to not overcook them, or it's really easy to overcook them. Front sear the same way that you do a reverse sear. Realize that because the steak, and this is a good carry-on point from our earlier conversation, because the steak is thin, there's going to be more carryover. A thin steak you front sear and you keep front searing it until the internal is 125. That thing's going to be medium well by the time you serve it. A thick steak that you front sear to 125, it probably won't be, maybe 130. It'll still be medium rare. So that is thin steaks front sear, thick steaks reverse sear.
Great.
More of that story. And you sear the same way.
Excellent. And just follow on with that. I believe in the video that you're referencing, didn't you do the, can't remember the name of the technique. You needed a few more degrees on the steak and you prop the kettle lid.
Oh, yep. The cracked lid method. So when you're doing when you're searing a front sear, a thin steak, if they don't hit the temperature you want, by the time the sear is complete, put them on the indirect side and then crack the kettle lid, put the lid on, but crack it so that heat is venting out on the side of the slow and sear. And then you're still, even though it's really super hot over the sear zone, because a lot of that heat is venting out, the indirect side is probably only going to be 250, maybe 300 degrees tops, convective heat. And that'll give that steak a chance to slowly warm up to your temperature. Remember, there's still going to be some carryover. So if you want it at 135, once it hits 130, you better be thinking about taking that thing off. Because they're thin, there's going to be more carryover. And it just, I hate to say it, but you're just going to have to cook a few steaks and eat them to really figure out what works for you with that technique.
Gotcha. And just real quick, I saw in the chat, we got the question of how thick is thick, and it looks like Justin.
1 inch.
There you go. Justin was saying 1 1/4 inch or bigger, 1 inch or bigger. There you go.
Yep. So even a 1.5 inch steak for me is on the bubble as to whether I want to reverse sear or front sear it. It's a judgment call with 1.5. You can get a really good result either way. Thinner than that, I'm 9 times out of 8 going to do a front sear, and then thicker than that, I'm going to do a reverse sear.
Nice.
So thanks, Justin. That was a good clarifying question.
Great. So our next cook is one that I can sort of sympathize with a little bit, and it is on a long cook. When is the proper time to rake, bank, sweep, and refill your coals? And how do you do it without getting ash all over the place? Someone else sort of thumbs up that question and said they have an XL in their 26er, and it seems they need to rake their coals at about 6 hours due to excessive ash buildup. I've got my own opinions on this. I'm really curious as to what you have to say about it, though.
I think 6 hours is a really good time to be raking the charcoal and clearing the ash. Just put the lid over the indirect side to protect it from the ash when you're sweeping, and spend as little time in the kettle as possible. Add only unlit, because remember, you have enough fire to maintain the temperature you're at. You don't need more fire, you need more fuel. 6 hours to me is a really good point, because by then depending on the fuel you use, there's likely going to be some kind of ash buildup. A good rule of thumb is when you get to the point where you find yourself opening the vents to try to maintain your temperature, your ash is starting to affect you. That's
pretty much the same I find in my 26. I run a little bit hotter than a lot of people do, and the notes that I have from this are it really depends on what temperature I'm running at. If I'm running at 275, and say I'm using briquettes, 5.5 to 6 hours, I need to scoot everything to one side of that XL. But if I'm running a different kind of fuel or testing a little bit of a cleaner charcoal briquette, sometimes I can get away with it for a little bit longer. But a lot of it depends on how much is burned down and what that particular fuel wants to do, more than anything in my experience with the XL.
Those are good points. I mean, the amount of ash in the briquette or the lump you're using matters. The temperature you're cooking at matters. 250 or 275, you're going to blow through the charcoal faster. You're not just 10% hotter, or 20% hotter. You're also it's really more than that, because you're not comparing 225 to 250 or 275. You're comparing 225 minus the temperature. So if it's 80 degrees, it's only 140 degree difference versus 175 degree or 165 degree difference, which is really more. It's more than 10 or 20%.
Mm-hmm.
So once the 6-hour recommendations for 225. You can even go a little bit longer with that. As you get over 225, it's going to decrease how long you can maintain that temp. But the thing to remember is it's so easy to add fuel with the slow and sear. You just plan for it and you should be fine.
Absolutely. This next question goes along with burning of fuels. This person says, I'm not getting a clean smoke using a pit temp control device because the fans turn on and off, not allowing what they believe is a constant airflow. What can I do to correct this?
So there are fan controllers out there that have a steady state airflow. So the fan adjusts the controller adjusts the fan speed so that the fan stays on constantly. You could try one of those. Personally, I don't think it matters. The other fans on the market cycle on and off. I've got one or two of them, and when I'm maintaining a temp, my fire is clean. What I would ask this person is, do they think they have dirty smoke, or do they know they have dirty smoke? When you look at it, is it a thick white? Is it like a gray color? Is it thin white? Is it thin blue? So does it look like good or bad smoke? Does it have an acrid off smell to it? Does it smell like it's burning clean? If it smells like it's burning clean and looks thin white or thin blue or even clear, you're probably fine with that controller. And my experience is with my controllers where the fan cycles, I still do get clean smoke.
Yeah, I can say I have the same experience. And one thing that I think people assume with those pit temp controllers is just because the fan's not blowing, it hasn't cut off airflow to the
right. There's still airflow. Yeah,
absolutely. Depending on what you have, for instance, if you have a Guru, there's a little slider up at the front that you have the option to shut off the fan entirely from the cooker. So as long as that's open at all, you are moving air. A few things did come to mind when I read this one as well. For instance, if you're throwing on wood chips constantly onto your fire, those ignite and burn instantly. If you're using some wet or not some wet, some green wood, different things could make that smoke come out of there that, like you mentioned, don't necessarily allude to a dirty smoke.
Yeah. I would caveat that with if you're using your techniques, if you're getting clean smoke without the thermostat controller, Guru, whatever, you should be getting clean smoke with it. And if you're not, the one other thing I would consider is, has the forced air from that Guru driven an air leak that you didn't really have without it? So that could be the other thing. Make sure all the air and smoke is coming out your exhaust vent and not around the lid of your cooker.
That's a good point. So moving on, another one here we have concerning the dripping griddle.
Yep.
This user wanted to know, can they cover their dripping griddle with aluminum foil to help ease the cleanup?
You certainly can. You only really need to use one layer of foil if you do that. I know it's a good rule of thumb to use 2 layers when you're not using a dripping griddle pan, but with the pan, you can get away with 1 because the pan will stop any additional liquid from getting to the bottom. I'm guilty of doing that myself, and I usually do that just because I cook so much. I get a little bit lazy with cleaning the pan, but the pan is easy to clean. So if people want to save the foil, they can. That's just personal preference. But yeah, no problems putting the foil in there. And let me check, because I have a feeling Justin's probably commenting on the foil. No, not yet. He's a big fan of foil, though.
So I was literally just telling somebody today that you could take away most everything I use, but don't take away my aluminum foil and don't take away my foil steam pans, because that's how I live in the barbecue world.
Yep.
This next question is a bit of an interesting one, and it is: has David ever used two Slow and Sear XLs in a 26er or a ranch kettle to ever rotisserie anything?
So I don't have a ranch kettle. I've cooked on one with Mike Allen from the Kettle Cookers when I was in Denver earlier this year doing a cook on GQ Barbecue's channel. So definitely check out GQ. He owns a couple of restaurants in Denver. Really great guy, great cook, has a lot of good videos. Mike has a Facebook group, the Kettle Cookers. He's also started a YouTube channel, so check him out as well. He knows a heck of a lot about kettles, and he can answer ranch questions a lot better than I can. Definitely don't put two XLs in a 26. That's unless all you want to do is sear. That's just way too much power in a 26er. And remember that the 26 is kind of vent limited. You know, that top vent only lets so much air out. So with two, you're not going to have the lid on. They work great in a rancher, I've been told. John Marcus, the producer of Barbecue Pitmasters, you know, from way back in the day, has a rancher, and he has two XLs in it, and he swears by that. We did make a ranch kettle edition for the rancher for a while. Mike Allen has one, so you can check that out on his channel or GQ Barbecue's channel, where we went and visited him. So we ended up creating that ranch kettle edition by request. But we stopped making them because we just didn't sell enough of them. It was too expensive to make them. Two XLs work great in it, though. I haven't cooked on it, but it worked great.
Yeah, actually, Mike is banging around in the chat right now. So if people that have questions about that ranch kettle, there's your guy.
There you go.
It does seem like a lot of the ranch kettle users I see do use some form of rotisserie setup. I guess when you've got that much real estate, you just do whatever you want.
Right.
But yeah, that was a great video on the on GQ's channel, because a lot of people I didn't even know the ranch existed for a long time, and when you sit down and really realize how much real estate that you have on that kettle, that's just amazing.
It's a very big cooker. It's a very big cooker.
Gotcha. So we've answered a similar question to this before, as to what's your opinion on lump versus briquette for a sear, but this user wants to know what's your opinion on lump versus briquettes for a low and slow session.
To me, lumpy charcoal is lumpy heat, whether you're searing or doing low and slow. Lump charcoal, it will be more consistent with the slow and sear than it will be without it. But and a lot of Kamado users are kind of forced to use lump charcoal. And they have all kinds of intricate methods for getting their charcoal to burn consistently for a long time, worrying about placement and that kind of thing. And if the big pieces go on top or bottom, they all have their own methods. With the slow and sear, it does tend to hold all the pieces together, so it will be more consistent, but lump is never going to be as consistent as briquettes. On the flip side, you do get clean smoke more quickly. So if you want to put lump, if you have a bed of burning briquettes and you're a little worried about keeping your smoke clean because you have something that's sensitive to smoke, you could go with you could add lump mid cook and have a little bit less of the ignition smoke, but you really don't have that much either way. So lump for me, I don't use that often with the slow and sear. There are other grills I use it with, but not with the kettle and the slow and sear. Not too often anyway.
Gotcha. Well, David, we're actually approaching our 30-minute mark, and we've got time for about one more question. And since you just mentioned grills that aren't the kettle, one question we did get last week was, when are y'all planning to sell that new grill that you brought up last week?
People are going to think we planned this because we just started talking about lump, and the new grill, I actually do use lump in sometimes. So still testing that, still tweaking. We're going to, even that said, we have a production worthy candidate, and the small tweaks we're making are more to the very minor aspects of the cooker. So all things being, fingers crossed and knock on wood, they're going to be on sale in March of 2019. I posted a really big Easter egg in our Facebook group, Slow and Sear Owners and Fans. So if you go check out the Facebook group, I think you're going to find some information on that new grill. And if you scroll down, you're looking too hard.
Well, so I've got to go over there myself now. But for everybody in the chat, I just did post the link to that group again. David, that's quite the cliffhanger to leave us on. we are done for tonight. Anybody who has any questions who haven't asked them in the chat, go ahead and ask them as a comment to this video whenever it finishes up and gets posted to YouTube as a video and on the replay. Go ahead and comment there, or go to that Slow and Sear owners group. We will post we'll make a post whenever the next live Q&A is scheduled, and go ahead and post a question there. But David, I'm out of questions for you tonight. I appreciate your time.
All right. Well, thanks, sir. I had a great time. We'll do it again.
All right. Excellent. Thanks to the moderators. And yeah, y'all have a good one.